so with that, I'm going to introduce Sameer Somal, someone who's been a person I met, I think it was 2012, may have been 2012, maybe 2013 when we met. So it's been over a decade. Sameer is, of course, someone who supports what we're doing. But to best describe him, high energy person, multi entrepreneur in multiple fields, trained as a wealth manager. That's where I met him, CFA, CFP. That's a great company, sold his interest, continued with his technology, World of Blue Ocean Technology. It's an international company. He's got a couple other companies that he can talk about that he started. He's a Lincoln historian, an all around great guy, and has a wonderful international charity called Girl Power, which I hope he talks a little bit about. But you're going to learn a lot about social media. You're going to learn a lot about AI. You're going to learn about a lot about cyber. You're going to learn a lot about all the things that affect your reputation and how critical that reputation is to the value of your business. And as we know, as we go through repeatable, sustainable, scalable, and transferable, everything that we're touching now is part of social media. Sameer is an expert witness. So as usual, if you have questions, it's an open forum, but go ahead and drop them in the chat. I'll try to touch on them. It's going to be a quick 55 minutes. And with that, if you'll make sure you mute yourself, we'll get ready and I'll turn it over to Sameer. Sameer?
Thank you so much for your kind words, Michael. I'm a member of this group. I know I've made a few friends in it, but I'm a member of this group. And I hope, today my goal is if I can make a few more lifelong friends and, maybe we have some laughs on Mr. Lincoln and maybe, we do some business together, either one I'd be happy with. But, I remember meeting you, at a much earlier point when I was an entrepreneur, and you're one of those people that does things from the heart. You really do care, which is why you created this organization, and it's why we've stayed friends over the years. It's why I looked you up when I've been in Tampa, and I think it's some of my success I can at least say is attributed to the Lincoln notion that I had a friend who believed in me, and I didn't have the heart to let them down. So thanks always for the same, and I'm delighted to be here. And yeah, if you have questions, you also can just jump in. No big deal. Can everyone see my screen? We're good.
Yes.
Okay, great. So as I mentioned, I'm incredibly blessed to be asked to share perspective. I try to do in-person events, one or two a month at the most, to conserve that energy. As per Michael's comments earlier, it is a lot of energy when you go and speak in front of a group of people. And on Mr. Lincoln's tour on his way to the White House in February of 1861, he chose to go to 5 state capitals, and he had so little energy. At times he needed to just recover because he kept speaking everywhere he went. He didn't just stop at those capitals. He gave speeches, and I really empathized with that. Having been in the same digital reputation, in terms of so much of Eric Schmidt once said identity will be the most valuable commodity for citizens of the future, and it will exist primarily online. And the main thesis today is we have an in-person reputation, we have an online reputation. And I find that the vast majority of people that I meet don't invest in their digital presence. And I think it was a harder case to make back in 2012. But if you just think about how much time you spend on the internet, and how little I had someone very successful that was referred to me, and he said, Sameer, but all these people that SEO is kind of a dirty word when you say everyone starts laughing because everyone's had a bad experience with it. But this gentleman was a successful executive, and he's like, I want to be known for these things, and he wants to leave his company and go to another one. He's like, I kind of reached the ceiling, and I think I'm ready to play in the biggest of leagues. And so he said, somebody had recommended you, and the long short of it is, it's the Warren Buffett notion. Price is what you pay, value is what you receive. What is your reputation? What is it worth if somebody who you meet in an event, who reads about you, can look you up and they can want to do business with you? And there's two big components of online. There's your branded keywords, and we'll also talk about LLMs and that shift and transition. There's branded keywords. Somebody looks at Michael Valdez, business transition. What do they find? Somebody looks up Sameer Somal. What do they find? Somebody looks up Sameer Somal, Blue Ocean Global Technology. And then there's all the things you want to be found for that you don't show up for? And how do you fill those two? And this gentleman, he's like, we'd outlined and gave him a couple options. I think one was like 7,000, one was 10,000 a month. And he's like, Samir, everything checks out. I just, he's like, this is sales 101. He's like, I'm just having trouble. That's a lot of money. And I said, look, I'm happy to be your friend, but if you think that you getting another job that's paying you mid seven figures is important, along with upside, then your digital reputation is worth it. And I was very real with him. I said, I'm willing to bet, my friend, that you have somewhere in the low mid eight figures in the bank and investment portfolios. And if you think that 100 grand isn't worth your own reputation and people finding out about that, or your kids or one day your grandkids looking you up and finding out about the good person you are, or mitigating risk of someone putting things out there, well, then either I don't know what I'm talking about, or you're just maybe not as smart as I thought you to be, because that's not a lot of money relative, and it's not going with you. And he was like, I get it. So I've evolved very much. If you were to meet someone who knows about digital reputation, I mean, I'm easily in top 1% of 1% of 1%, because I built a company that does it. I'm self-learned on that subject. And then law firms hired me and said, Sameer, we want you to be an expert witness and quantify damages when people sue each other. And I was recently at this conference I spoke at the National Association. It was an international car conference in Vegas, and I had so much fun because I'm politically agnostic for a bunch of different reasons. And I got on stage and I did a proverbial mic drop, and I got up there and I said, before we talk about digital reputation, I said, can we just address the elephant in the room? Can we just talk about Donald Trump? And immediately you could just see the sea of faces. And at the end of my opening, when I went in, and I, of course, made some comments as to things on both sides. And I said that, actually, when he was former President Trump, he reached out to me in the E. Jean Carroll case and actually tried to hire me. And I told his team that, I can't do 3 months of work in 10 days, but if you give me a month, I'll make a decision. And they said no. And people came over to me and said, that is the first person that's ever spoken about Donald Trump and not offended anyone. And it's probably, and I've had people, when you're an expert witness, when you're called in, and I'm an expert witness on M&A and economic damage, a lot of things, a number of subjects, and people try to disqualify you through what's called a Daubert motion, which is actually kind of a compliment. They want to say you're not worthy. And I've had people respond and say that, lawyers, the president of the United States has asked him to opine on digital reputation. So I share that with you because I'm at all ends of the spectrum in that. And one of the key critical points in how I learned so much was a gentleman named Richard Levick. The late Richard Levick was like an uncle to me. He was a lawyer. He owned a PR firm. I cold called him and we became good friends. So reputation is intangible. How do you measure trust? How do you measure love? How do you measure, the fact that I could probably call Michael Valdez and ask him to introduce me to someone or to do me a favor, and he'd probably do it, or to help somebody, and he'd do it without thinking about it. So that's an intangible. The AI revolution is here. I've spent a bunch of time. It's funny because there's a gentleman, he's not here right now, but he has a place in Tampa. He lives outside of Orlando. He's from Polk County. And Michael, you're going to love this one. He was out in Vegas for this investors meeting, and he sent me a voice message last week, and we've become great friends. This gentleman, he's a wonderful human being. And maybe I'll just say, his name's Matt Chansey. Some of you might know him. He is a wonderful guy and a very, very dear personal friend. He sent me a voice message about that Michael had left him about me, and he was laughing. And we've become very fast friends because we have a mutual friend named Sia Sabir who runs Mick Law, and Mick Law has been a client of mine for a long time. And so Matt, has said, and I have this company, Legal Experts, today's not about me. I'm happy to talk about some of that, but as it relates to AI, and Matt and I have been discussing a number of trends related to alternative investments, and because of the acceleration of AI, where there are asset classes that are underweight or that have huge upside. And he said about AI, he's like, Sameer, I don't even understand it. I don't know, why would you want me a part of legalexperts.ai? And I said, Matt, there's few people I've made faster friends with and more respect for, but you actually represent so much of the target market in the legal ecosystem top law firms, expert witnesses, lawyers, and that you don't understand it, and you don't know the first thing about it. So if you can be part of that. And so there's a couple points on AI that will make, one, I do know a little bit, about that subject, and there's such a migration to to large language models, and people are buying and making purchases much faster from them. And so now you have to think about search. You have to also think about how do you rank and how do you show up on LLMs. And that's something we can talk about. Well, many times people don't think about their reputation until something bad happens. If you're thinking about what you want to do, I mean, Michael mentioned that he sees some, things on LinkedIn. I'll be the first to tell you that I have a whole team of people that manages my LinkedIn. That doesn't mean I don't know what's being posted. I do, and it all gets sent out. But I have a system, and LinkedIn's a full-time job. We've all been there. We spend like 3 hours, and we're like, was this work? So, if you've achieved a degree of success, I've got a team that supports my executive mandate, and I've got 3 people that are almost full time that are in my LinkedIn. Not pretending to be me. They're using pre-approved templates. So how do you amplify, gain leverage on your own time? And so I constantly, the things that I've done for myself, I end up doing for clients and stuff. I think that's why we have such a ridiculously high retention rate in people we work with, because we kind of have the airport test. Would you want to get stuck at the airport with this person? And somebody thinks no, there's probably a good reason they shouldn't be a client. And so I'm big on abundance. I know that's a little cliche, but from my standpoint, I would rather share everything I know in this presentation. And at least some of you go back and be like, wow, this is one of the best we've ever heard, not just in this group, but ever. And I'm sure a few will say, you know what, Sameer might bring the average up of my life, and we find a way to work together. And so I, as Mr. Lincoln, would pretty much share everything I can, because this hour is precious to me as it is to all of you. So I'm using this to kind of guide my comments. Today you can go unlovable from I got a great idea to I run an app that totally changes things. If you're not investing in your narrative, and I can walk through all the different reasons why people convince themselves not to consciously invest in the narrative, and I can single-handedly address a good portion of them in a few minutes, because I think that many of those would be running through your mind. One, I've already kind of addressed the money. It's way more valuable than a full-time staff person, a junior person working for you. It's just way more valuable. We've had a compelling, on merit offering, because we can give a team of people that is dedicated, that you'd have to hire one person to handle your online presence, and that person would be to manage a bunch of other people. One person doesn't have capacity. Another reason why people don't invest, all my business comes from referrals. Your best client refers you. The first thing they're doing is they're going online. I know and can answer all the reasons why, and the greatest and most compelling example is perhaps, I get a lot of introductions, and I'm blessed for that. And so, somebody had reached out to me. I don't even remember the gentleman's name. And he said, oh, Sameer, I got 2 proposals for PR, digital marketing, etc. And, my CPA had heard of you. And he said, I got 2 proposals. Can you beat this price? And I said, look, I don't really care about price, but if that's your goal with me and that's what you want to talk about, I wish you the best. If you really want to have a conversation, great. But what I tell you to do is go look up the company that you're thinking of working with, and go look up the founder. And if they are so much better in practicing what they preach than we are, then we probably will never talk again. But I'm willing to bet they're probably not. Maybe they are. That'd be great. And I'd love to know who they are so I can learn from them. And so I think that many times in life, we have to turn the mirror around on people. And I can give you a whole bunch of examples how my digital presence. So look, we all know these, now it was the digital revolution. Now it's the AI revolution. That is real. This slide is an old stat, and I have to update it. But going back, look at the way that companies are changing. I mean, now you can go from, hey, I got a great idea to I run $1 billion company far faster than ever before, but it's not any easier. And which of course is of interest. The world's largest companies today are, so if so much of the overweight or the weight in the S&P 500 is technology, if we spend so much time but yet we don't really invest in our own personal, our own business's digital presence. Like it's like we've all thought about this. I've had these inflection points where it's like, wow, X thousand bucks a month, that's a lot of money, that's a mortgage payment, etc. And so many people talk themselves out of. Now, I've spent money on different things and tried them and they haven't worked. And I've spent a lot of money and I could go back and say, oh my God, I've spent X 100,000 trying different people and it hasn't worked out. But all that I've learned from, and all that's brought me closer to other things that far outweigh an investment in that. And so, if
Samir,
sure,
may I ask a question? I don't want to take you off track there, but you
no
described
problem.
narrative, and I don't know that people understand exactly what you mean by narrative. I know it's the story and the presence that you leave out there. And also, you mentioned, I loved the fact that when someone was talking about hiring you, you suggested they go and look up, the digital presence basically of the company that you were competing against, and look at both companies and their founders to see if they're doing what, are they walking the walk? Could you talk a little bit about that in this next minute or two?
Yeah, certainly. So one, your narrative is what are the common threads that people take away from you when they read about you? So for Samir, my narrative is confusing, which I think sometimes plays to my advantage and sometimes is hurtful, like anything. What is that Lincoln line? There are few things that are wholly good or wholly evil, but rather an inseparable combination of the two. Then the narrative is ultimately the sixth sense people get about you and whether they want to do business. And
Trust.
absolutely. So there are a couple key pillars to my own personal narrative that have become competitive advantages. One, of course, I've built a number of digital assets, and those things tell a story of who I am. But we'll give an example of Girl Power Talk. So Girl Power Talk was just an idea. Peter Drucker called to eat strategy for breakfast. There's extraordinary populations of youth, and you can have a young woman in Kampala, Uganda, in Karachi, Pakistan, in Mumbai, in Jakarta, Indonesia, and she knows who Roger Goodell is. She's watched Breaking Bad, but she's under the chains of patriarchy, and so I saw an opportunity to do something about it. And Girl Power Talk was just a name. Then I ran this race. There's a picture here at this race in Delhi, and then it became a company. So to just put further clarity, Girl Power Talk is a for-profit company based in India. We employ women and young men in 42 countries. We have a nonprofit, Girl Power USA, that runs our philanthropic efforts. We have built a system where the name Girl Power Talk automatic jerk filter. It can be like your perfect job description, but jerks really won't apply because they're like, oh, that must be some stupid nonprofit. You have to answer 27 questions in order to get an interview, and it goes through AI and plagiarism checks. We automatically filter out lazy people. We automatically filter out people that aren't thoughtful. And I got on a call with a prospective client for a pretty important mandate related to legal consulting. So consulting on a very sensitive case involving a publicly traded company. And the lead attorney is a managing partner of a big law firm in New York. And we got on and she said, Sameer, we started the conversation and I was like, ready for all our good questions. And she says, I think we're going to hire you. And I said, okay, that's good. Tell me more. And she said, before we get started, I want to know about Girl Power Talk. I said, really? Why? And she said, you reminded me of what's important in life. I went to Yale Law School. I clerked for this federal judge. I'm like, done it by the book. And here I am at 55 years old, and I got to find, a man that's 15 years younger than me who's doing some of the things I said I do. And so I feel like not only do I feel like you're the most qualified or as good as others, you got, 2 pages of case history versus some of them have 4, but I've seen you speak. But I think that me being a part of some of the things that you're doing will bring me happiness and more fulfillment. And that's happened now over and over again because people are skeptical. People have dealt with a bunch of charlatans. And so if your digital presence reveals who you are as a person, what matters to you, you have a lot less work to do. So another component why it's so important is your investment there will save you time, energy in that notion of trust, and it will save you. How do you quantify it? Everyone wants an ROI. Everyone thinks I say this. I have this fun. I say, they're asking me the overly smart question about, ROI. What's it worth if, somebody gets on the phone with you and if on a scale of 1 to 10, and 10 they're signing a contract with you and they're already at 8, what's that worth to you? So anyways, I'm rather verbose, so we'll just keep going. Hope that was helpful, Mike.
Thank that. I thought that was a great answer.
Okay, great. We got to be thoughtful about that investment. Ultimately, people drive artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is like a fear. You create it, you can destroy it. I've written a number of articles about that. There's large language models which govern outputs, and there's also generative AI. Generative AI is training the models for what comes out, and large language models actually building the models. Two different things related. And I've spent considerable time on both. We've built a tool. So I'm launching this company, legalexperts.ai. It's essentially, without getting too much into it, there's a number of holes in the global legal. First of all, the legal ecosystem is, lawyers are always looking behind at case precedents. They're never looking forward. So they're even, you can say your industry is, like financial advisors are very slow to adapt because of compliance. Although I appreciate compliance, it's no longer an excuse not to invest in your digital presence. Just get everything approved, like a bunch of people I work with. But lawyers are really, so I'm being incredibly thoughtful about that. And I, at the risk of talking too much about this company I'm launching, it's pretty exciting. It's always fun when, you have a great idea and you work on it for a year and you think it's going to be so hard to like get people to buy in. But after working on it for a year and taking a year, you have so many people that want to help and support it and write their own personal checks. I mean, to me, that's the ultimate trust and a huge responsibility to live up to. So I'm in that journey, which is a lot of fun for this company, which also will give me more perspective here. How do you show up in large language models? If Sameer Somal shows up, what is it that people are searching for that allow him to populate? That's kind of the big question. Those are constantly evolving. There's a couple really important factors. It's not the same. If you rank on search, you don't just rank on large language models. Of course, there is overlap. 40% of citations on ChatGPT are from Reddit and Quora. That doesn't mean that they're finding Reddit and Quora as their primary source. It means they're verifying info and they're giving an overweight to people that are mentioned there, which of course plays into a lot of what we do. Of course, I mean, the stats, it's like every year, the amount of data we produce, like in the last year or two, surpasses all the data, up until entire history until then.
And I think if I may, there's a question that came up that goes back just one minute, but I think it ties into this because all this information is coming out. How do you distinguish really great looking charlatan digital media, one from the truth? And I think getting to that core essence, I think, is on everyone's mind who's ever worked on this, if they are a beginner or if they're expert. And with all this new AI coming and different data, how are you telling, how are you finding what's good or valuable and that which is less so?
Having like anything, you fail over and over again to succeed only once. There's no short answer to that. So I would just say that you can spend your time in life trying to create a perception that you are something, or you can spend your time actually becoming. And if you invest in your digital presence on who you actually are, simplifies everything. And, I have a bunch of proverbial traps and tricks to figure out who people are, if they are what they say they are. I mean, I have a couple competitive advantages. I meet someone and I can send to my team and I can do basically a whole investigation on who they are. And I do that. I connect with people on LinkedIn. I see this guy and my team does an investigation, makes a determination if I should talk to them. If they're not sure, somebody else talks to them. And so, I wish I could tell you that it was so easy and, we could, just hit a button and call someone from MI6 or the CIA to figure it out. But it's not. But another favorite topic of mine is, history is a wonderful thing if only it were true, Leo Tolstoy. So, big data, of course, a driver in artificial intelligence, how things are trained. There's this massive war going on for the super artificial intelligence. So general artificial intelligence and super general artificial intelligence, we've read about it, and it's company specific. It's also global. I mentioned this earlier. No it's funny as you evolve and you grow. I've had fun with people that are my friends, and I've said, and a number of them, I do work with, but I always say that this is one of the first things I start with when someone wants to work with me. If you believe this to be true, based on what you've seen over the last decade, then you got to invest in your digital presence in some way, shape. It doesn't have to be 10,000 a month, but you got to start somewhere, and you got to start doing a number of things. Otherwise, keep being a passenger in the digital world and life. Continue to be a passenger and don't drive, but accept that you're choosing to be a passenger, and don't create I know I'm a retail dealer in knowledge. Abraham Lincoln called it. Nothing's easier than self-deceit. What each man or woman wishes that they believe to be true. And I'm very direct with people. I'm like, great, you don't want to invest in your digital presence. You don't think it's important, but don't delude yourself into thinking that you're going to get a whole bunch of opportunities, and stop wasting your time if you do, thinking that, oh my God, I'm missing out. I could be doing so much more, because you probably won't find someone more credible than me to invest your time and resources in. And if you're looking for someone so much better, I'd love to meet them. And of course, that's not something I said, 3-4 years ago, but I can say it confidently now. Yeah, we all know what reputation is. Many of us do. We've all seen, we were talking about, the 90s. I oftentimes say that I'm referred to someone, I'm like, your website looks like that movie from 1995, Sandra Bullock and the Net. It looks like a website from that movie. People still have those. To your question earlier, you got to create high quality content. We do interview features for clients. People hire us. Somebody comes onto Zoom, we don't publish it, but we edit, transcribe what they say, and then we publish that. And we have a number of different ways of doing that. If you just go to blueoceanglobaltech.com, and on our homepage, I also own a couple other publications, Her Conversation. You get author profiles. If you Google Enterprise Investor, which is CFA Institute's publication, Enterprise Investor, and you Google Enterprising Investor, Sameer Somal, you'll find all the articles I've written for CFA Institute, which I've had, I think, 2 they've said that are in the top 10 of all time. Again, not their academic journal, more of their mainstream reading one. I just mentioned this earlier. What people are finding out about you, it's paramount. I do so much more business and productivity because my digital presence. Look, I love meeting new people. Like it's one of the things I made a conscious effort to do over the last 18 months is to add more people into my life. Probably one of the reasons why I'm such a fan of one of your local colleagues there, Matthew Chansey, because I just think he represents all the right things. You gotta make your life easier. We all get choice overload. Websites, blogs, videos, social media, AI. Start somewhere. Usually that has to do with controlling your digital presence. Of course, audit where you're at. Of course, we've all Googled ourselves. If you haven't, do it. If you otherwise, look yourself up in ChatGPT. But what are you doing about it? I've helped people and guide. Some people have said to me, "Oh, Sameer, you shared so much. I'm going to go do it myself." I'm like, "Great, go do it. And if it's successful, come back and tell me about it. Let's figure out some other ways to work together." And but the reality of it is that we are so limited by time. It's like even today, I know I'm going to get calls from 10, 15 different people, and I've got like a back to back all day. I'm like, how am I going to get there? What am I going to do? How can I shorten? So my digital presence helps with that. Oh, I was mentioning that I always try to reach out to new people. I can leave people voice message. Even on LinkedIn, it happens all the time. I say to someone, look, we all get these calls, we all this, but if you look me up and think that I'm worthy of something, then we should talk. But if you look me up and you don't think that, then don't call me back. People call me back all the time. And I mean successful people, but that's because I've invested in my digital presence and I've done it thoughtfully. Of course, online reputation management, there's a number of studies. Basically, everyone knows they need to invest in their digital presence, but most people don't. Kind of what they all show. I don't want to bore you with that stuff. Of course, your digital reputation is the things that are found on all these sites. This is how I've broken it down client time. I know some of you were thinking, how's Sameer going to get through all these damn slides? He's so slow. No, I'm just here to give a few comments and go through. You got to build it. The Bible predicting rain doesn't count. Building the ark does.
One of the things you've touched on a couple of these, but there's a couple of key tactics. And as you get to where you're going, I'm sure you'll kind of review for us. But I'm thinking some things that we could do today, this audit that you talked about just a second ago, I think is important. And, even the fact that, people will buy and sell a business and they'll go through a full audit process, right? They're auditing financials. But I would say that digital presence now in the world of buying and selling a business or wanting a business, even a franchise, I think a lot of this goes to the digital presence and how that business is functioning digitally can be a key indicator of its future value. Any thoughts?
Got a pen? Let's get started. So I worked as a middle market investment banker on Merrill Lynch's private sale and referral network. I bought a majority interest of a company called Capital Expert Services that does M&A valuation. We oftentimes are a complement. And one of the ways that I've become very good friends with folks like you that are involved in the sale and transition is that if you can build a digital presence and invest in the technology leading up to a sale, you can justify a higher multiple by owning the real estate and justifying a higher price. For instance, one of my clients is a roofing company on the West Coast, and they keep getting hit up by private equity firms. They're $50 million top line. And she's like, Sameer, we're both 50. We don't really want to sell. What are we going to do? And after all the taxes, we're not going to have much money. And then we're going to our lifestyle's damn good running this company. So she said, I want to grow it. So what do you recommend? So it does have a lot to do with that digital presence and what I say, controlling digital real estate. If you control that digital, you can, and I've done it. It's one of the reasons why a number of these bankers work with us and they introduce their clients and we help grow the business, right? Everyone's like, well, I want to grow it some more and then sell it. How many times have you guys heard I want to grow it and sell it? Give you the Heisman. So I think that I become a partner in that. And because I'm not, doing business under, any particular license, I'm not an attorney. I'm no longer registered, but I got a very clean U4 as people look up on me, squeaky clean. I'm able to build business partnership and say, hey, look, if I'm just a big believer in if you benefit somehow intangibly, financially, you got to share it with others. You got to share it with the people that got you there. And I try to send referral fees to people, and they say no. So I say, look, I'm gonna donate it to our foundation. I'm gonna do this in your honor. Fine. And I oftentimes joke I'm paying a bunch of money in referral fees to people I don't even like that much. So I'd always rather have more. Partially true. Hope that's helpful. I'll just keep going here. Again, break it down into digital assets. It's like, there's an article that I recently authored for Her Conversation. It's nothing to do with women's issues. It's a publishing platform. I met a wonderful gentleman in Springfield named Joe McMiniman. I told you earlier, owns this Long Nine Museum, or he's facilitating. And, when he saw that I was published by the New York State Bar, he's just like, how? He's like, how did you do that? So those assets create really seismic opportunity for you to grow your business. So many people we've helped because, they got a website and nobody maintains it. And then it takes a week to get changes updated, and then they're never done and they lose discouragement. They never update their site. So we've done the small things as our team has expanded, which has resulted in bigger things. I have some personal websites here. Client of mine, very dear friends of mine, Bobby Hennebree, who runs John Elway's family office. I do a lot of work with family offices and, speak at those events. And, it's almost narcissistic. You feel like I don't want a personal website, but people are going to look you up. People are going to look you up. Wouldn't you rather control the conversation? Mine's a little outdated. I don't really like a lot of people like it, but I'm working on a new one that I think is more representative of who I am today. I said that to my team. They're like, you need a personal website. I'm like, why? They're like, don't you want to control what people say about you? Repair. We've all dealt with those situations where you have to repair. I know a lot about reputation repair, removing content online, suppressing it. And there's so many reasons why you may need to repair your reputation. There's a court case, you get a DUI, there's divorce paperwork out there. Someone has the same name as you. There's just so many reasons. And guess what? If you build your digital presence, you have a whole bunch of assets. So you can nullify that quickly, mitigating risk. But it's so funny because I got kind of bored with online reputation, which is why I started spending more time and expanding. And our team has an intake process and we're very good at it. And I still get involved. They come directly through me because I think people appreciate that. And it also just creates more. But many times people have become clients for years because something negative happened. I could walk you through a whole bunch of examples of those, but I'll spare you. here's just a few examples of what can take place. But so many reasons. Somebody made a dumb decision in college. It's following them around. Family office principal made a comment about Israel Palestine. Now it's out there. People are nullifying contracts. I mean, there's all sorts of things. There's a funny case with Patrick Snay. Basically, he sued Gulliver for age discrimination and they didn't renew his contract. But, overjoyed by the family victor, daughter Dana goes to, Facebook and shares, after the confidential settlement, Mama and Papa Snay won the case against Gulliver. Gulliver is now officially paying for my vacation to Europe. Suck it. So now if you look up Patrick Snay, it's all about daughter Dana. I lost the 80 grand. Basically, that's all because of, and that's his reputation. So that always gets a fun laugh. You got to monitor it. We built a tool for LLMs that is able to find out like what people are searching for. Actually, we were going to subscribe to a tool, my co-founder on legalexperts.ai, as we're getting this venture together, right? Measure thrice, cut once, and we're doing a lot of work on it because you need to rank on both, and we do this for clients too. And there's a company that was funded with like $20 million for monitoring how LLMs rank, like just to monitor, not even make change. And he's like, the tool sucks. Let's build our own. So we built our own, which I think we can spin off and do something with. But more importantly, it practically helps us because if I can know what people are searching for when they find Sameer Somal or somebody else I seek to emulate, some other competitor, I can back myself into owning that. And that's the wave of the future. If you want to be progressive, you really want to control digital real estate search, AI. Of course, there's a bunch. I know some of you are managed service providers, MSPs, so you guys know a lot about this. It's real cybersecurity. Of course, there's so many ways. I get so many scams. Here's a funny scam story. So I land in Dallas and I meet this older prominent woman and we go out to lunch and I get there and she's so flustered. And I'm like, why? And she's like, my credit card has been hacked and this and that. And I said to her, what's going on? Well, she's like, look, there's these charges and they're so good. It's scamming. And I said to her, I'm pretty smart in this. I said, show me what happened. And she's so flustered and we can't even sit down for lunch. So I said, show me your credit card that they're talking about. Great. I said, call it. Great. She called it. I said, ask them if there are any charges. No, completely fake. But they scammed by saying, hey, and I get it all the time. But why am I telling you this story? Because I did something really funny. So I said to her, so she's so angry. Can't believe I'm, finance executive, or she's like semi-retired. And so I say, look, I have a way of dealing with these people. So I take her phone and they're texting her and I start texting back and saying, yes, thank you so much for your help. I really need your help to fix this. I call back and I leave a message and I say, hey, I'm so-and-so friend. I'm getting this resolved. Thank you so much. Of course, you'd never call a bank and leave a message in this day and age. It would never happen. But I leave them a voice message. So this guy calls me back. And I know sometimes you get people with, not to make stereotypes, but oftentimes happen because many of these scams originate from the sub-Sahara. But this guy sounds like perfectly American. He sounds like, I don't know, Connecticut or something, or Illinois or Indiana. Like he's like, and he calls back and he's like, yes, this is city and this and that. And I say, yes, hello, my friend, I got this thing. He's like, yes, it's been compromised. So I lead him down the primrose path, and then I serve him up a nice silver platter. And after he just thinks he's going to totally scam me and my esteemed friend, I say, hey, before I give it, I got a question for you. Guy's like, yeah. Thinks he's got all this money. I say, could you just do me a favor? Like, is there a mirror somewhere like near you? And I said, can you just go to that mirror real quick? And I said, if you do that, we'll proceed. The guy goes to me. I say, can you just tell me how it feels to live your life trying to scam people, you pathetic loser? And that's all you have to offer the world. This guy released 25 F-bombs on me. And I laughed like Lincoln would on one of his best stories and hung up. And this woman was so happy that I gave back. Anyways, that's my story of scammers. I don't know what I'm talking about. Let's keep going. Of course, there's all these examples of data breach. I know we're coming up to the end here. Dark web, a whole nother area of interest. How do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? You got to start somewhere. Again, I could walk you through a bunch of case studies here. You got to have a process individually for clients. I think we know that how much of the wealth is caught up in privately held businesses, and how do we help navigate that? You got to be of value. I've been a good friend to folks in that arena because I can help bring value and get them closer to the sale, which they oftentimes need anyways, or they're not ready for us. So we can help them get there. Of course, reputation is so important. I now make decisions based upon more so what are the potential downfalls to destroying what is a relatively good reputation, as opposed to how I can, but I always look through that lens. And, now we ended rather quickly, and we ended early. So I think we can, talk and open up questions, and I will close. You guys see all my windows.
And I would ask people to go ahead and unmute. One question came from Jody, and then I'll turn it open to other questions.
Jody's
She
smart.
was she was
Yeah.
trying to figure out what's the most important for them. And I know that's a really broad question, but if you were to rank things to start working on first, what are some of the first things when we talk about social media that you would start with? What are the first one, two, or three?
Well, you gotta, there's the difference maybe being a little bit liberal between posting somebody else's content or doing a post through ChatGPT that you fix a little bit, and actually going and writing an article and having it published somewhere and putting that out there is like, the difference between, night and day, black and white. So you got to create digital assets. So I had somebody who's so proud of their LinkedIn presence. And, they've grown this following. And I'm like, have you made any money from it? Well, and I said, one of the problems is that when you spend all this time on your LinkedIn and you feel so good with everyone caring, it's gone, because the only thing that ranks on LinkedIn when your name's searched is your profile. So your LinkedIn posts are basically, transactional digital fireworks, which is the same as advertising and spending, although that has a purpose but it's organic results. You got to create digital assets. So I would say digital reputation, Jody, there's a degree of PR, there's a degree of content creation, and then there's a degree of the technical work to rank the content and make it stronger. Most people, including PR agencies, which is how we became so, they do what's called spray and pray. Throw stuff out there and hope it does good. I mean, if you're throwing good stuff out there, that's helpful, but there's a process to it, which I tell people about all the time. All the things, say go create a Quora profile that is 50,000 words, and it takes a while to do that. But once you do that, you're more authoritative. Our team goes to hundreds of business directory listings and business directories and profiles, and we create them with versions of bios that Google says, wow, Jody's name is mentioned 500 places. We're using a pre-approved compliance bio in Jody's case. So I don't know. Hope that's helpful. Next question.
Sameer, this is Jim. Thank you for this. I work in the franchise space. I'm just curious what your thoughts are. Sometimes my clients, they might have the best digital reputation of their own, but then they're aligned and affiliated with a brand that maybe somewhere else in the brand damage has been done. Do you have any advice for how they mitigate that as best they can?
Yeah. One is hyper focus on local geographic search. Oftentimes the franchise has their own geographic area. So if let's just say their geographic area is Kansas City, it may not be relevant what people think in Denver and New York and elsewhere. So figure out where it's relevant. There are a bunch of different ways to control local search. Of course, the Google My Business listing is foundationally important, ensuring that you optimize that. That's another overlooked area. Of course, Google prioritizes their own basically listing service in Google My Business, and so making sure that is optimized will allow it to feature more prominently locally. I think you also need to create digital assets around the narrative of what they want to be known as, and thoughtfully, without alienating the parent company, differentiate and say, hey, look, put a name to their franchise, put a name and why they care and why they serving the local community. When we've had situations like that, we just, what's out there, what don't we want people to find, how do we push it out in the relevant geographic vicinity. Hope that helps.
Thank you.
Hey,
We're,
Sameer,
we're
this
getting
is
ready to wrap up here. We got about 3 more minutes, so I want to let you know that some people will end up leaving, but if you can stay a few minutes, we'll keep recording here. So if we've got time for one more question, has anyone got a great question
I
for
have
Sameer?
I got one. This is Carl. Can you hear me?
Hey, Carl, what's
Yes.
up?
Hi, Sameer. Interesting presentation. I'd like you to picture a Venn diagram and solve for the Venn diagram. Okay, the Venn diagram, first circle is creating content, key component. Second circle that you mentioned, we all face this critical limitation of time. Third circle is monetization, which is, like you said, ultimately where we all want to get. We're not doing it as a hobby. We're creating this digital presence, yes, to benefit the world with other people we meet, but we all have to generate cash flow. The fourth circle is the little people that can't afford $10,000 a month. How do you solve for that Venn diagram?
Thoughtful question. And I think it all comes down to one, taking some initial steps. So for instance, a foundation of your digital presence is your company website. Is it optimized? Most people aren't doing plugin updates. I've had so many people come, we got this website on Wix, you get what you pay for, if
Right.
so if nobody's coming into your storefront anymore, like 20% of the people that were 10 years ago, but you're loath to spend we basically turn down almost every single person that comes to us to build a website unless they're doing a campaign with us and work. It's not even worth our time. I'd rather just keep building our own digital assets. I said to our team like 3 years ago, I'm not interested in that. And so one, control that foundation. Two, own your branded keywords. So look, we have a lot of clients that are paying good money because they've allocated and they have people internally and we can integrate with them. You don't have to spend 10,000 a month, but you got to start somewhere. I would just argue you don't have much of a business if you can't invest $2,000 in your digital presence, $3,000. Like, I'm sorry, I say it to people, I keep it real. I'm not somebody, we work incredibly effective. We're incredibly effective with internal teams, but you can't complain about people on payroll that you're not getting value for and then not go and make a decision to invest in your bit. Like something has to give. Decisions have to be made decisions have to be made to free up resources to invest a couple $1,000 is what I tell people. And that's not important, then, we may never speak again, and I'm fine with that. But don't waste your time thinking about what you need to do online because you had it here and now you decided not to do it. If you create digital assets and you own your branded keywords, that gives you more evergreen content and being relevant on LinkedIn. If you look at your competitors, we do a lot of competitor analysis. What are all your local competitors ranking for? Who's spending money? Why? Where? That helps us guide where we invest resources. And we've also been thoughtful about, somebody, we're doing, 4,000 or 5,000 a month but we're guiding them as if we're doing 15 because they got people internally. So, most people just, we're all tethered to our experience bias. So I've just found that when I've given people good advice and helped small businesses, it's end up resulting in incredibly, bigger opportunity. I don't know. It's a great question and one I could probably talk to you all day about, but hope that was helpful.
Thank you.
So with that, I'll say, remember that we record this. You're going to get a recording of this. Sameer, feel free to slice and dice it and use it in any way you want. And also, it goes out to our membership here in another week or so. And if you're a member, I would encourage you to share this with others in your network and let them hear what we've talked about today. Sameer, I really want to thank you for taking the time to jump in here. And the next time you're in Florida or Tampa, if you have time for a coffee or tea, let us know. I'd love to see you in person. And I'm really excited to hear all the great things that Girl Power Talk has developed into. I think it's fantastic. So with that, we're going to cut the recording off. If people want to stay on for a minute or two, they're welcome to. But thank you so much, everyone, for joining today. And remember, the next meeting is the 18th of September for our fundraising at the Community Foundation. So if you'll stay a minute or two, we'll let people leave if there's time for another question.
I have a
Yeah, I
question,
can, sure.
if you don't mind. So, hi, Sameer. As a fellow digital marketer, I'm curious, what's your philosophy on agencies that specialize in a particular vertical or industry compared to ones that stay more generalist or specialize in a different way?
Yeah, a lot of the knowledge is it's applicable across businesses. Ultimately, nice to meet you too, Robert, and happy to have a conversation because many times we can serve clients better together than we can independently.
100%.
People oftentimes look at their digital. We would both agree that ultimately you're only going to be successful with a client in digital marketing PR if they're guiding exactly what needs, if it's all filtering through them. So I oftentimes say to a client that ultimately you got to sign and approve on things, and when you get really comfortable, you don't need to sign and approve on things. But until then, it has to be a learning curve about your business, because only you know the idiosyncrasies, and that also reverses out some of the dissatisfaction people can have. I've been more of a, hey, I'd rather serve different industries and be really thoughtful about clients or partnerships or doing white labeled work for other companies and finding a way to make them more profitable, as opposed to niche expertise. I think that's like, I have niche expertise for financial advisors. I mean, I was one, I owned a firm, but I would never want to specialize in that. My philosophy that's worked for us is more that we work with companies agnostic of industry. I try to find good people and clients that we can add a lot of value, and they're not going to be a pain, and they understand the value, and they're appreciative of that. I think that when you specialize in one industry, there's pros and cons. So my take has been that. Having said that, I know people that are very successful specializing in a particular industry, and that's great.
And we've
I also think you
resisted
run
the
into
specialization. We've resisted the specialization, but it's amazing how often I hear like, "Oh, you should specialize. Oh, you should specialize." And so it's because we have seen the similar thing where
Yeah.
there is a lot of knowledge that goes across from one industry to the next. And so if we can go in and do a good assessment and really get a lay of the land in the beginning, then it's still good. But I did connect with you on LinkedIn as well. So happy to find a time to connect sometime.
Yeah, my last comment would be that the specialization, you also then run into like, you're working with people that are competing for the same clients,
Yes.
which nobody wants. So I've taken a page from Abraham Lincoln with respect to people giving me advice. So if somebody were to tell me to specialize, I would return and say, well, tell me why you think that. And once they tell me why, I would say, okay, thanks for sharing. And tell me about your success or experience in specialization. And let's talk about how it's applicable to my business. And you'll either get some really good insight, or you'll find out that someone's full of shit and they just said it because they wanted to give some advice.
Mm-hmm.
And I found over and over that every time somebody asks me a question, I figure out a way to turn a mirror back so that I can understand where it's coming from and why, and if there's some valuable information for me from that question. And that's how Mr. Lincoln did it 101.
Awesome.
Question.
Cool. Thank you.
Other question?
Anyone else?
I'll throw a real quick comment about specialization just for a half second, that I actually hired a company in my industry, and then I realized they were farming the entire state of Florida and feeding out the business brokers. And it was like, who all is getting these great leads? And so some were going to the guys that have been around for a long time, and some of us were getting the younger stuff. So I thought at first specialization was good for my own needs, and then became a little concerned that the favorite people were getting the better leads as they were farming the who wants to sell their business in the state of Florida. So I backed away from that.
I'd say to me, people asking that question or suggesting specializing, the clients want to just understand that you understand their business and their industry. In the tech space, whether it's medical security, financial security, legal security, we can all pretty much do the same thing as tech, but them feeling that I understand their industry, it goes a long ways. Like I'll just throw out a couple of keywords in the lending industry. Oh, you understand our market. The other techs didn't. There's all they felt that we understood them. They felt that they're heard and their needs are going to be addressed because you specialize in their industry.
Yep, that makes sense.
Got it.
Thank you.
Great stuff, man.
Thanks. Any other
All right.
questions? We're good. Great.
So with that, thank you for taking the time today and coming and joining us. We hope to see you again sometime. I would encourage everyone to reach out to who you know on the list on LinkedIn. And I'm glad to hear Matt had got my message. I left a message for him. I know he was busy, and I'm glad that you guys have connected. He's a great guy, and it's a small world here. So thank you so much.
Yeah. No, I've found him to be of the highest character and intent, and we personally become friends. So small world with respect to the genuine and authentic Matt Chance.
We thank that. I'm sorry we didn't see him today, but he'll get a copy of this, so he'll be able to record it or look at it when he gets a chance. So with that, with everyone, I'll say goodbye and take care, and we'll see you next month, and we'll see you here on September 18th.
Thanks again,
Take
Sameer.
care.
Thank you, folks. Nice to meet all of you.